Andrew, thank you for that. And we're back inside the convention center as the lunch break continues here at the Conservative National Convention. But happy to be speaking with two people I love to speak with. Kim Wright, NDP strategist, beside her, Cole Hogan, Conservative strategist. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Listen, we're going to begin with you, Cole, because last night, obviously, a huge level of support in that vote for Pierre Poilievre, 87.4%. Does that result put aside any questions about Pierre Poilievre's effectiveness and being the right choice for the Conservative Party?
I think so. That was a pretty ringing endorsement from the membership. I think a pretty good barn burner of a speech. I would say also high on the EQ quotient, on the emotional intelligence scale for Pierre. So I think it demonstrated a bit of a shift in tone for Pierre to talk about more social issues and some things that are close to him that I think were very endearing to the membership. And the 87%, I think, is, truly a ringing endorsement.
Do you think that speech influenced the vote last night?
I think the membership kind of had their mind made up when they walked in the door, but I think the speech put it over the line.
Okay, Kim, what do you say? Questions put to rest now?
Oh, I think there's a lot of people who there was a resignation of, this was just how this weekend was going to work out. For political junkies like me, watching the results, good result, better than Harper, not quite as good as Jagmeet Singh or Jack Layton, but, good for what he needed to do. He left the divisive language for Danielle Smith's speech a few moments ago and tried to make people feel like there's a bit of steady as you go. Although I will say, the man needs to read some history books because there's some things in there that were historically very inaccurate.
Yeah, care to elaborate?
There was a comment he made about how those who were putting in spikes on the railroad in the frozen ice didn't give up. Sir, I'm not sure they were allowed to give up, so there's some questions about how he revised some history, but I'll leave that for others.
Okay, we'll leave that for others. You talk about him securing the base, Cole, but I wonder how you grow it. Because we were discussing it yesterday, the numbers that show that there is a gap between the priorities of the Conservative base versus the priorities of Canadians who do not vote Conservative. How do you bridge that gap when, in that speech last night, yes, there was a slight tonal change. Yes, there was more almost a personal touch to it. There was no sloganeering in that speech. But in terms of policy, very much what we've heard since 2022.
Yeah, when we were speaking yesterday, we talked about the need for Pierre to be consistent, but to also branch out, to bring on those extra million voters that we talked about. And in particular, I think that takes place in Ontario and in British Columbia, where we saw gains in the last election. So while we have the broad Conservative message and the Conservatives that we're talking to here in Alberta, truly the base and the bedrock of conservatism, there needs to be a BC and a Ontario-facing message to bridge all of conservatism together to appeal to Canadians more broadly. And I think we saw, linking in some of the history, your mileage may vary on parts of it, but I think bridging that into the message of Canada today, and for young Canadians in particular, why they don't see the country working for them, why they don't see, being industrious, working hard doesn't get you what it used to. And I think Pierre's message spoke to that generation, and I think that's how they can get to that extra million votes.
Mm-hmm. And without a doubt, Kim, there are more young people attached to this party than there were before Pierre Poilievre.
Oh, absolutely. But there was an interesting tone to his speech last night. It was almost the next campaign will be an "I told you so" campaign. He's like, well, we won the debates and we won the student vote and we got more votes than we've ever gotten before. And Mr. Carney's taking all of our conservative ideas, but we'll do it better. It almost said he was setting up a campaign for, see, we told you so. And I'm not sure that's what people were looking for. I think there was delegates I had been talking to were looking for a little bit more contrition. He didn't win his seat in Carleton on election night. He did well. All the measuring of drapes that was happening for their government didn't materialize. There are some big challenges. He's had floor crossings and very public breaking up and potentially more to come. There wasn't a what's my plan going forward other than I don't give up and I'm going to wag my finger later on. That's not really a strategy, and hope isn't a strategy. And I think that's going to be a challenge for Mr. Outhouse and Mr. Poilievre in the days and weeks and years to come. I'm not quite as bullish that we're going to have a spring election as others.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with the spring election. And just to be clear for folks at home, speculative at this point. There's no plans underway. It is, though, the talk that's happening in Ottawa. Picking up on your point, has the party learned enough out of 2025? Because we always knew that Pierre Poilievre was going to do well with this delegation, because again, the survey showed with the latest Abacus, 79% of the base support him. So that was his starting point coming into Calgary, and then you have a room full of delegates that the party has been working very hard to get in here to reaffirm that kind of support for Pierre Poilievre. So I think none of that is a shock. But up against that are floor crossers, and when Pierre Poilievre was asked about those floor crossers, asked if he had to change anything, he said no. So have lessons been learned, or are they just being ignored?
So part of the effort of getting to this point for the 87% was to do the internal work so we can do the external work of bringing on Canadians. I think there's been a lot of reflection that Pierre and his team have heard from Canadians and the membership at large. A lot of that is happening at an event like this, of course. And I think that, Pierre did a lot of rounds of phone calls. I even got one to talk about sort of what he needs to do differently, what he needs to do next. And he was actually consulting, doing some of that Mulrooney-era approach where you consult very broadly and bring everything back in and see what you can do differently. So I think there's been an effort to reflect while not sacrificing the conservative principles that got us here, because, never has an opposition leader gotten more done in government. In the end of the Trudeau era, and for Mark Carney, they move on policies that Pierre Poilievre originates. He sets the conversation, and then the Liberals respond. That was the tail end of the Trudeau government. And Mark Carney's government, the policies that they lead on or try to act on are mostly their conversations that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have dominated. So that's not something that Conservatives here want to see change. They want him to maintain that pace and that rhythm, while also taking some lessons learned from the last election, because yes, we did not form government, and many people were beleaguered by the fact that, we were 20 points up, and then we still lost due to Trump and then Carney coming in. So that's a reality, but no one's ignoring that, and here was an effort to rally the troops, take some lessons learned, and present the best foot forward for the next election.
Okay, but if Trudeau ran with ideas that were presented by Pierre Poilievre, if Carney ran with ideas that were presented by Pierre Poilievre, and you look at the polling numbers, and the party is actually neck and neck with the Liberals oftentimes, but where they lag horribly is in leadership. Is Pierre Poilievre the right man to sell that message if another party and leader is winning on that message?
Sure. Well, I think the conversation with Pierre here is a lot of the membership here. The reason why he got that 87% is the membership, and a lot of people who are familiar with him see him doing the actual hard work. It is difficult when, the Liberals take on all of your policies and sort of take the rug out from under your feet. But the proof will be in the pudding with this prime minister. We've seen a lot of fancy words. We've seen the Davos speech. But what are we actually getting? Are Canadians seeing any material difference in their quality of living? And if they don't, if there's no deal with Trump, if Kuzma goes horribly, they're actually going to have to pay the toll electorally, because the Liberals didn't win this in a smashing fashion. Yes, they came back from the dead, but can they actually govern in a way that sets them up to win the next election? And I think they're going to have a tough time actually convincing Canadians that they've done enough to materially improve the life of Canadians.
Okay, Kim, I know you want in.
I would say the things that materially advance the lives of Canadians are things like the dental care program and pharmacare program that were directly because of the New Democrats in Parliament, and pushing that because it has seismically changed people's lives, being able to have access to those services. The question I would have for Mr. Poilievre and his team is, it was great he called you and some other folks and said all the nice things and showed up to, fancy downtown Toronto, Albany Club, conservative places that he basically had said, it'd be a cold day in hell before he showed up in. But then he was there because he was worried about a leadership vote. The question becomes what happens on Monday and Tuesday and the months and weeks ahead. Is it going to be back to business as usual? There was some, pretty words that we have heard from the Conservatives that they've changed the personnel, the policies, and yet, folks that ran his campaign last time were around this weekend. So was it a bit of a shell game to get through this convention? Maybe. And are there more floor crossings to come? Because if you don't believe you need to make some changes after people have called out your House leader and whip for being aggressive with staff, not making people feel welcomed and loved in Parliament or even in the party, I think he's got some real challenges going forward. And, the other thing we haven't talked about is the New Democrats are about to elect a new leader. Depending on who that is, and I certainly have my preference of who that is, that's going to shift the dynamics entirely as well. So maybe he gets squeezed out on both the left and the right, because Mr. Carney certainly has some conservative tendencies. So where does that authenticity hit? Where does Pierre Poilievre find himself? That's going to be those questions.
Okay, well, we are watching, and I will say, I think many Conservatives would like the NDP to do better.
I think there are some people who think they've got safe now seats, Conservative seats in places like Northern Ontario and such. They do not. Let's be very clear. The New Democrats want those seats back and are going to take them back.
Okay, Kim Wright, she gets the last word. Sorry, Cole.
That's all right.
But we'll speak on Thursday. Okay, Cole Hogan, Kim Wright, thank you for that.
Thanks, Mike.
Well,